It is now our great pleasure to conclude these 1.5 discussions with, again, a stellar panel. I have the pleasure now to introduce you to Awa Dabo, who is the Director and Deputy Head of PBSO at the UN, who will give us her final remarks.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to make these remarks on behalf of UNDPPA and PBSO. Let me first start by congratulating Switzerland, Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, and the International Peace Institute for successfully organizing this event. Building linkages, of course, between the humanitarian and human rights pillars in Geneva and the peace and development pillars here in New York is just a good example of the network multilateralism that the UNSG has emphasized in his new agenda for peace. And I came in just as we were talking about a bit on the new agenda for peace. It is also, might I add, the raison d'etre for the UN's Peacebuilding Support Office where I work, where we try to serve as a bridge between the humanitarian, development, peace, and human rights pillars of the United Nations. So building on the discussions that have taken place in the past 2 days, we would like to offer 3 suggestions that we think can best foster collaboration on peace building between New York, Geneva, and of course, the whole world. First, and noting the principles underpinning the new agenda for peace, which are trust, solidarity, and universality, we must all do more. We must all do all we can to extend our partnerships for peace building beyond Geneva and New York. This requires our efforts to listen to those that are often not in the policy spaces that we are privileged enough to currently occupy. In most of these cases, these are the youth, they are the indigenous communities, they are the persons with disabilities, and there are other groups. They are the key stakeholders to our peace building efforts, and they are often the front line of our response to prevention and peace building. It is with this in mind that tomorrow and on Friday, and with the generous support of Finland, and in collaboration with Interpeace, we are convening the first of its kind UN CSO dialogue on peace building. The dialogue will include participants from all 5 regions, will enable networking and connection between diverse CSOs. The dialogue will allow for not only an exchange between the UN and its partners with civil society, but it will also allow for opportunities for civil society's influence of and engagement on policy developments that will shape the peace-building discourse going forward. But there is still much more that we can all do. The Summit for the Future, for example, is a great opportunity, and together we must work towards expanding spaces for collaboration and partnership with civil society on it. Secondly, on prevention and sustaining peace. It's time to move from rhetoric to action. The new agenda for peace calls for a paradigm shift, one that requires a universal view of prevention. In this regard, it advocates for national prevention strategies for all countries, notably not just conflict-affected countries. In our view, this universal approach is really important because it builds trust and it engenders solidarity. It is therefore the time to bring the expertise from Geneva, from New York, from Bangkok, from Addis Ababa, from Santiago, from across the world, to model what national prevention strategies could actually look like. There are models, similarly, that are nationally led and that can offer useful lessons. For example, the Human Rights Commission could share its experiences of the Universal Periodic Reviews. ECOSOC models the voluntary national reviews. And the Peacebuilding Commission offers a platform for sharing these lessons and for crafting national prevention strategies. And as we prepare these national prevention strategies, of course, we must also start thinking about how we intend to fund them. And this is where expertise from New York and Geneva and elsewhere will also be required to help us to collaborate on innovative financing models for prevention and for peace building. Our third and final point is on the need to address the interlinkages between climate, peace, and security. A new agenda for peace recognizes that this issue is central to prevention and peace building, a point that was made during the session on Tuesday in this event. We are pleased that for the first time at COP28, there is a Relief, Recovery, and Peace Day on the 3rd of December to bring visibility to climate and security. Furthermore, the increasing demand for the Peacebuilding Fund to support climate peace and security underscores the real importance of this issue, the increasing importance of this issue. For example, between 2017 and 2022, PBSO through the PBF has invested roughly 130 million towards climate peace and security efforts. This represents 53 projects implemented in 27 countries by 17 UN entities and 13 CSOs. But there's still much more that we can all do. We could, for example, scale up the Peacebuilding Fund, including through the UN's regular budget, to expand our resources to be able to address these many complex challenges. We could also heed the call in the new Agenda for Peace to establish a dedicated expert group on climate action, resilience, and peace building under the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And finally, we could also establish joint regional climate hubs between the UN, regional organizations, to support member states to accelerate progress. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the past 2 days have produced real concrete action points, which together we can take forward and use to build trust and to build peace. We at DPPA PBSO stand ready to work with you on the next steps to transform our commitments on prevention and sustaining peace into effective and meaningful action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dabo. I give now the floor to Mr. Itonde Kakoma, who is the president of Interpeace. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if it were possible, I would simply say I agree in full and conclude my remarks. I believe you represented the spirit and intent of this meeting so well, and particularly in broadening the scope of what we mean by two geographical cities, namely Geneva and New York, as not focused on geography, but symbolic in what they represent, precisely as you indicated, extending to other parts of the world, not least of which being Addis, Bangkok, Rio de Janeiro, and elsewhere. Now, with that, on behalf of the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, as one of, I believe, 5 distinguished members composed of the Geneva Graduate Institute Center on Conflict Development and Peacebuilding, I believe the director is in the room, DCAF, who we heard, the director in the opening remarks, GCSP, who was fully present in the room, our dear colleague leading principles for peace, and the Quaker United Nations office, I myself representing Interpeace, and through the able leadership of the director to my right, really to extend a deep word of appreciation to the hospitality and collaboration with IPI for hosting this. Thank you for facilitating this important exchange, which we know will build on further. Now, there are 2 reference points for me that really embody the spirit and intent of what we're doing here, one of which we heard earlier today from the special representative of ILO. And she quoted, if I'm not mistaken, from the Constitution of ILO, where it states that there's no lasting peace without social justice. I don't know if I got the quote correctly, but similarly, and earlier just today, discussing with the leadership here at IPI on health and peace. WHO Constitution stipulates the following: the health of all peoples is fundamental to the attainment of peace and security. And that's why it's critical that we have this exchange. We could refer to other such statutes that understand intricately the connections between various sectors, various specialized agencies, and the advancement of peace, security, and development. And symbolically, coming together is a further iteration of the same point as enshrined in the WHO Constitution, and specifically, and I think the overarching message which we hear, and by way of the opening remarks of Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Switzerland to the United Nations, where the deficit of trust globally has direct consequence for the effectiveness of multilateralism. And so we, in the form of GPP, exhibiting trust together and across the Atlantic, helps perhaps to embed a spirit of trust across institutions that can, and thank you for the opportunity to co-chair together with colleagues from CMI, that important engagement, the first of its kind as you described, but can further embed a spirit of trust also into formal multilateral systems. So I want to thank you again to the leadership here in New York, to the executive director, GPP, and to this permanent mission of Switzerland here, the United Nations, for really extending an open hand to us to be able to advance these important discussions. And in short, I agree with all of the recommendations.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Itonde. I have to add one very important partner to the GPP coalition, which is the GCSP, here with Annika also being among.
I believe I even pointed to Annika.
Oh, you did? Okay, so I'm sorry. So I'm a bit confused. I'm always very nervous to forgetting one of our partners. So all of them are mentioned and are here with us today. So with this, I give you the last word, Ambassador, to close this meeting. And then at the end of your remarks, I will hand over to IPI to completely close the meeting. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Wow. So I wrap up, but that's not the final wrap up. So I'm happy to hear that. No, colleagues, I mean, I just came across the street from the Security Council ministerial meeting on the Middle East. And there I thought when I came here and felt that spirit of creativity and of concrete action, that Prince Zeid was very correct to say at the beginning that we need more of that concrete Geneva spirit here in New York to help us really fulfill our duties. So I would like to start by thanking all of you for those, I think, very intense 1.5 days. I could grasp some of the discussions, and others I'm happy to then watch on video afterwards. But what I have heard, it has been very inspiring and also concrete. So a huge thank you to IPI for being the host and having us all here, but also to this Geneva crowd, bringing the Geneva spirit here, and to the hardworking moderator, Amnissa and GPP for everything, and to the larger public for contributing. I think, let me elaborate if I want to try to build on the stimulating and fruitful discussions you had over the last 1.5 days. Let me try to elaborate on a few concrete opportunities for closer cooperation and follow-up between Geneva and New York, for which my country, Switzerland, is also committed to playing an important part. And I can start echoing Ava, what she said. I mean, we are here starting to negotiate the pact for the future and preparing the summit for the future next year. And this shall include the new agenda for peace, with these 3 really, I think, most relevant elements of trust and solidarity and universality. That's really what should bring us all together. And it is a crucial process that does not have to take place solely in New York, in the so-called New York bubble, but we really need your spirit and expertise. Geneva has a significant contribution to make in all of the concerned clusters, especially since Geneva-based organizations play a leading role on both implementation and field operation. And Geneva's voice is also of crucial importance for the adequate mainstreaming of human rights in the forthcoming Pact for the Future. And Ava mentioned the aspect of inclusivity. I would also emphasize there that women have to play an important role there. And we are have been trying in our Security Council mandate so far to give women and youth a stronger voice, to amplify their voices also in the Council. And I also take your point that we have to shift paradigm more to prevention. And that's something we can start on national levels with prevention strategies and build up also to the international and UN level. Second, the other topics discussed during this Geneva Peace Week meets New York, of course, offer very concrete opportunities to make use of that two-way street over the Atlantic Ocean, as you said. And I would mention maybe 3. And I think you just had the tech envoy here. And we have the Global Compact facilitation going on. So I think we should continue to harness the unique expertise of Geneva in the digital realm from ITU to e-commerce to the use of new technologies in mediation. I think that's really something Geneva can contribute to the discussions which are most relevant here in New York. And second, I hear you just had an absolutely inspiring panel on artificial intelligence. Actually, we had started such a discussion here in the margins of the CSW, talking about artificial intelligence and women's rights. And I think really that it is absolutely key that we discuss and intensify discussions on challenges and opportunities offered by AI, and that cannot take place without the sectoral expertise of Geneva. And while it is important to devise governance models for the long term, the impact of artificial intelligence is already very real in the security realm, the disinformation sphere, intellectual property or trade, to only name a few domains where Geneva is already full hands on, and I'm sure you discussed all that. I'm thus also pleased to hear about the plans to hold future meetings of the High-Level Advisory Board on AI in Geneva in 2024. And as you may know, we already, during our first council year, had put some emphasis, and had also, thanks to Diplo Foundation, had for the first time an artificial intelligence accompanying a debate of the Security Council, and it was our first open debate on trust. And finally, there is also an untapped potential when it comes to making better use of the Geneva-based expertise in the field of climate data. I think that was also mentioned, the work of organizations specialized in climate monitoring and scenario planning, such as WMO or UNEP, to support the planning of humanitarian operations, should serve as a model for entities in the peace and security pillar. And my country is co-chair of the informal expert group on climate security and its impact on conflict. We have actually, on a technical level, managed to improve, strengthen, or even put for the first time language in 10 geographic situations in the council. So progress is possible. And the question is how we can translate that from the more technical level to a more political level, and from here, New York, to the field, as was mentioned before. I think it's already great progress to have, in the meantime, 6 climate security advisors in operations, going up from 1 at the beginning of the year. But it is, of course, not enough. And if we connect all those dots with Geneva, I think we can become better. So let me conclude by underlining that the next annual edition of the Geneva Peace Week will take place in Geneva in October next year. And that's actually coincidentally the exact same time as our second presidency of the Security Council. What a coincidence. So we thus look forward to building on this year's achievements and to working with partners for another successful edition of the GPW. Partners, that is you, and not only gathering powerful voices and relevant stakeholders from Geneva, New York, and the field, but also, and more decisively still, contributing to building trust and advancing peace over the Atlantic again, I would say. So I would like, with that, thank you so much for contributing, and this is just the beginning. And with that, of course, I give back to the moderator, and I know that Prince Zeid will wrap up. Thank you.
Well, after that masterful summary, I won't say anything on the substantive part. You know, I think having so many of the Geneva community, the community associated with the Geneva Peace Platform here in New York, there was almost this incongruous feeling that when you take people from a city known for its silence and beauty and bring them to a city that's overstimulated and never sleeps, you wonder how you could wake a city filled with people who are sort of stimulated. And it's worked, because the discussion over the last day and a half was rich with not just good thinking analysis, as we've just heard, of how we can better connect Geneva to New York, but also in a practical sense, the way in which problem solving is done in Geneva can greatly assist break the stasis, or break the sort of rather difficult paralysis we feel in the Security Council, but beyond that as well. And so I want to thank everyone who made the trip over from Geneva to be with us here in New York, and to thank all the panelists for your contributions, to thank the concluding panelists for their final remarks, and to thank Ambassador Baeriswyl for a masterful summary. And with that, please, also, I'd like to thank my own staff at IPI for the amazing job they did in hosting the event here. And please have some lunch before you leave. You all deserve it. And safe travels back to Geneva. And if you should be at the airport taking Swiss Air flight LX23, I'll be on that same flight tonight. So I'll see you at the airport in a few hours' time. But thank you so much for attending. And with that, we wrap up this meeting of Geneva meets New York. And thank you. Oh, it's the Geneva Peace Week meets. Thank you so much. Thank you.